try to hit down in here if we can manage it. This is the brain stem right here. The brain stem is the portion of the brain that's responsible for controlling respiration and heart function. If we can knock that out, then you're sure that animal is actually going to die as a result of their stomach. There is nothing in the regulations that says the animal's heart has to be beating as they die, but we do find that there's a little better bleed out if the heart's still beating. In the case of a swine here, you can see that the frontal plate of the skull, it's a little harder for you guys to see because of the lighting, but the frontal plate of the skull in pigs is actually pretty darn thick. This is where low caliber firearms are not that great to use. A .22 long rifle should not be your first choice. One of my favorite firearms and loads to use for stunning of just about any species is a .410 with a slug. That's a really nice setup. In some cases, if I'm talking to farmers about on-farm euthanasia, I'll recommend they go to Walmart and they buy a 12 gauge. And they get some slugs for that. For fully grown bovines, it does quite a bit of damage, but more brain damage is a good thing because that animal won't ever wake up again. So remember, in all cases, the target is the brainstem. That's where we want to hit. This upper part up here, this is the cerebral cortex. You can see that, I'll show you some brains here in a little while. But it's that upper part of the brain that's got all the little ridges in it. Looks kind of like spaghetti, only bigger. That's the area of the brain that is associated with higher level perception. So this is where the animal is going to feel and hear things, taste things, smell things. So if we pass our shot through that region of the brain first, it sort of knocks out consciousness. We go a little deeper, and that's when we knock out respiratory function and heart function. Let's see here. Yeah, we're at 10:07. I'm going to walk through the slides, and then after we get through with shot placement on the slides, I'll send you guys for a break, and we'll roll some heads out here, and we're going to kick things off with looking directly at some dead heads. I think that'll be kind of a nice way to start up in the next section. So with pigs, in the case of market animals, from that 200 to 300 pound range, here's what we want to do. We want to draw a line across the top of the eyes if we're going to use a captive bolt device. So right here. We want to shoot about 1 inch above that mark, parallel with the spinal column. So you want to be parallel with the back. Typically that's just slightly angled to the skull. So that's where you want to place your shot. You got to be careful with this though with firearms. If you use a low enough power firearm, in a lot of cases the bullet will actually hit the skull and could ricochet and just come right up over the skull under the skin. So you got to be really careful if you're using firearms on pigs. In older boars and sows, you should place that shot just a little bit higher. So about 1.5 inches to 2 inches above that line across the top of the eyes. They have a larger head. It's more elongated as they get older. And so we have to move our shot just a little bit higher if we're using a firearm or captive bolt gun with those more mature animals. In the case of sows and boars, I highly recommend using a mechanical stunning method because sometimes those animals can be very tough to stun with electricity. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, if we place that shot appropriately, that bolt's going to penetrate the skull, it's going to destroy the cerebral cortex. So that's that upper part of the brain. Let me see if I can completely black things out here. That'll make it easier for you to see these pictures. That's better. Can I just leave it that way? You guys comfortable with that? Okay. If you fall asleep, I'm just going to stop talking and hold my laser pointer on you until everybody's staring at you when you wake up. All right, so as far as pigs go here, with proper shot placement, you can see that in this case we're dealing with a cadaver head, and this was an electrically stunned pig. So we started out by drawing that line across the head. I'll tell you this, when you are training people to place stunners, like place captive bolt stunners in particular, markers and drawing tools are your friend. When I train people for the first time to captive bolt stun bovine, like cattle, I'll get tail chalk from our local farm store, and I draw the X on the head of the animal for them and tell them this is your landmark. The next step as they get more proficient, is I will make them draw the X for me. And I usually do that until they're absolutely sick of me asking them to do that. And then at that point, I know they're probably ready to go off on their own. But you should use markers and tools like this as much as you can, because they don't harm the animal, as long as you're not poking them in the eyes with them or anything like that. So you can see here, we drew that line, 1 inch here, or well, right above the eyes, 1 inch above that, right in the middle of the head. Then we shot with a captive bolt gun. Then we looked at where that shot ended up. So you can see in this case, with those landmarks, we entered directly into the center portion of the brain, pointed right down toward the brainstem. Perfect shot location in this case. Some people will place shots with captive bolt guns behind the pig's ear. Is there anybody that does that in here? Yeah, there are a few people. That's an effective method, but as far as landmarks go, one thing you want to do is put that captive bolt gun right at the base of the ear. So sometimes I'll see that people get a little too high with it, and they may not actually knock out the brainstem, but you want to go right down in the base of the ear. There's kind of a little hollow down there, and you want to aim for the opposite eye. If you do that, you're going to pass right across the lower part of the brain, right across the brainstem. That'll be effective every single time. In the case of cattle and calves, so now you can imagine that example I'm telling you guys about here. Draw the lines on the animal. Do not be afraid to do that. Shot placement is at the intersection of two imaginary lines drawn from the outside corner of the eye to the opposite pole, not to the ears. This is an important thing to remember. The X goes from the outside or the top of the eye, that's going to get you to the same point, to the opposite pole. Now, in the case of dairy animals, in particular Holsteins, they have a longer skull. In that case, you're going to want to place your shot about 2 fingers width above that X. So in the case of Holsteins in particular, if you're slaughtering dairy cattle, mature dairy cattle, place your shot about 1 inch above that X. It may feel a little bit high to you, but it's going to put you right on the money every time. You want to place your stunner so it's at a 90-degree angle to the frontal plate of the skull. And in the case of captive bolt stunners, put that stunner tight against the frontal plate of the skull. In the case of firearms, do not put the muzzle directly against the animal's skull. Leave a gap, at least 6 inches of gap, because there's a lot of gas that's going to escape from the end of that barrel, and you need to give that gas space to escape. And so you've got to have a little distance with a firearm. In the case of sheep and goats, here's an example in sheep. We want to place our shot at an X between the eye and the ear. The camera angle is not the best on this one, but there's like a knob that's on top of the head. That serves as a pretty decent landmark, actually. Shoot down, aiming for the animal's throat. That's where you want to go for in the case of sheep and goats, the captive bolt.